June 26th, 19 All Shrewsbury is laughing over Ilsa's last exploit, and half Shrewsbury is disapproving. There is a certain very pompous young senior who acts as usher in St. John's Church on Sundays, who takes himself very seriously, and whom Ilsa hates. Last Sunday, she dressed herself up as an old woman, borrowing the toggery from a poor relation of Mrs. Adamson's who boards with her. A long, full black skirt bordered with crepe, a widow's bonnet, and a heavy crepe widow's veil. Arrayed thus, she tottered down the street and paused wistfully at the church steps as if she couldn't possibly climb them. Young Pomposity saw her, and, having some decent instincts behind his pomposity, went gallantly to her assistance. He took her shaking, mittened hand. It was shaking all right. Ilsa was in spasms of laughter behind her veil, and assisted her frail, trembling feet up the steps, through the porch, up the aisle, and into a pew. Ilsa murmured a broken blessing on him, handed him a tract, sat through the service, and then tottered home. Next day, of course, the story was all through the school, and the poor lad was so guyed by the other boys that all his pomposity oozed out, temporarily at least, under the torture. Perhaps the incident may do him a world of good. Of course I scolded Ilsa. She is a glad, daring creature and counts no cost. She will always do whatever she takes it into her head to do, even if it were to turn a somersault in the church aisle. I love her, love her, love her. And what I will do without her next year I do not know. Our tomorrows will always be separated after this, and grow apart, and when we meet occasionally, it will be as strangers. Oh, I know, I know. Ilsa was furious over what she called Perry's presumption in thinking I could ever marry him. Oh, it was not presumption, it was condescension, I said, laughing. Perry belongs to the great ducal house of Carabas. Oh, he'll succeed, of course, but there will always be a flavor of Stovepipe Town about him, retorted Ilsa. Why have you always been so hard on Perry, Ilsa? I protested. He's such a cackling oaf, said Ilsa morosely. Oh, well, he's just at the age when a boy knows everything, I said, feeling quite wise and elderly. He will grow more ignorant and endurable after a while, I went on, feeling epigrammatic. And he has improved in these Shrewsbury years, I concluded, feeling smug. You talk as if he were a cabbage, fumed Ilsa. For heaven's sake, Emily, don't be so superior and patronizing. There are times when Ilsa is good for me. I know I deserved that. June 27th, 19 Last night I dreamed. I stood in the old summer house at New Moon and saw the lost diamond sparkling on the floor at my feet. I picked it up in delight. It lay in my hand for a moment. Then it seemed to elude my grasp, flash through the air, leaving a long slender trail of brilliance behind it, and become a star in the western sky, just above the edge of the world. It is my star. I must reach it before it sets, I thought, and started out. Suddenly, Dean was beside me, and he too was following the star. I felt I must go slowly, because he was lame and could not go fast. And all the time the star sank lower and lower. Yet I felt I couldn't leave Dean. Then, just as suddenly, things do happen like that in dreams, so nice, without a bit of trouble. Teddy was beside me too, holding out his hands to me, with the look in his eyes I had seen twice before. I put my hands in his, and he drew me towards him. I was holding up my face. Then Dean gave a bitter cry. "My star has set!" I turned my head for just a glance. The star was gone, and I woke up in a dull, ugly, rainy dawn, with no star, no Teddy, no kiss. I wonder what the dream meant, if it meant anything. I must not think it did. It is a Murray tradition not to be superstitious. June 28th, 19 This is my last night in Shrewsbury. Goodbye, proud world, I'm going home. Tomorrow, when Cousin Jimmy is coming for me and my trunk in the old express wagon, and I will ride back in that chariot of state to New Moon. These 3 Shrewsbury years seemed so long to me when I looked ahead to them. And now, looking back, they seem as yesterday when it has passed. I think I've won something in them. I don't use so many italics. I've acquired a little poise and self-control. I've got a bit of that bitter worldly wisdom, and I've learned to smile over a rejection slip. I think that has been the hardest lesson of all to learn, and doubtless the most necessary. As I look back over these 3 years, some things stand out so much more clearly and significantly than others, as if they had a special meaning all their own. And not always the things one might expect either. For instance, Evelyn's enmity and even that horrible mustache incident seem faded and unimportant. But the moment I saw my first poem in Garden and Woodland, oh, that was a moment. My walk to New Moon and back the night of the play. The writing of that queer little poem of mine that Mr. Carpenter tore up. My night on the haystack under the September moon. That splendid old woman who spanked the king. The moment in class when I discovered Keats' lines about the airy voices. And that other moment in the old John house when Teddy looked into my eyes. Oh, it seems to me these are the things I will remember in the halls of eternity, when Evelyn Blake sneers and the old John house scandal, and Aunt Ruth's nagging and the routine of lessons and examinations have been forever forgotten. And my promise to Aunt Elizabeth has helped me, as Mr. Carpenter predicted. Not in my diary, perhaps. I just let myself go here. One must have a vent. But in my stories and Jimmy books. We had our class day exercises this afternoon. I wore my new cream organdy with the violets in it, and carried a big bouquet of pink peonies. Dean, who is in Montreal on his way home, wired the florist here for a bouquet of roses for me. 17 roses, 1 for each year of my life. And it was presented to me when I went up for my diploma. That was dear of Dean. Perry was class orator and made a fine speech, and he got the medal for general proficiency. It has been a stiff pull between him and Will Morris, but Perry has won out. I wrote and read the class day prophecy. It was very amusing, and the audience seemed to enjoy it. I had another one in my Jimmy book at home. It was much more amusing, but it wouldn't have done to read it. I wrote my last society letter for Mr. Towers tonight. I've always hated that stunt, but I wanted the few pennies it brought in, and one mustn't scorn the base degrees by which one ascends young ambition's ladder. I've also been packing up. Aunt Ruth came up occasionally and looked at me as I packed, but was oddly silent. Finally, she said with a sigh, I shall miss you awfully, Emily." I never dreamed of her saying and feeling anything like that, and it made me feel uncomfortable. Since Aunt Ruth was so decent about the John House scandal, I felt differently towards her, but I couldn't say I'd miss her. Yet something had to be said. "I shall always be very grateful to you, Aunt Ruth, for what you have done for me these past 3 years." "I've tried to do my duty," said Aunt Ruth virtuously. I find I'm oddly sorry to leave this little room I've never liked and that has never liked me, and that long hill starred with lights. After all, I've had some wonderful moments here, and even poor dying Byron. But by no stretch of sentiment can I regret parting from Queen Alexandra's chromo, or the vase of paper flowers. Of course, the Lady Giovanna goes with me. She belongs in my room at New Moon. She has always seemed like an exile here. It hurts me to think I shall never again hear the night wind in the land of uprightness. But I'll have my night wind in Lofty John's bush. I think Aunt Elizabeth means to let me have a kerosene lamp to write by. My door at New Moon shuts tight, and I will not have to drink cambric tea. I went at dusk tonight to that little pearly pool, which has always been such a witching spot to linger near on spring evenings. Through the trees that fringed it, faint hues of rose and saffron from the west stole across it. It was unruffled by a breath, and every leaf and branch and fern and blade of grass was mirrored in it. I looked in and saw my face, and by an odd twist of reflection from a bending bough, I seemed to wear a leafy garland on my head, like a laurel crown. I took it as a good omen. Perhaps Teddy was only shy. The end.